After the recent Arcane Odyssey update, quite a few classes were nerfed, leaving the new top builds kind of in question, but out of all the classes that weren't nerfed, one of them is Warrior, and in fact, they somehow got buffed, making it a likely candidate for the new best stat build right now in Arcane Odyssey. And in this video, I'll be presenting to you the best Warrior build that you can get in Arcane Odyssey. But before I do that, I just want to quickly mention that we do frequent giveaways in my Discord server, which include sunken items and other high-in-demand items. Join the Discord server in the description down below. But onto the Warrior build, I'll be explaining in depth and talking about why it's objectively, or at least one of the best builds that you can get as a Warrior. So to start off with, my equipment. I'm using the full Cernic set, sleeveless robes, boots and faults, all enchanted with hardness. The reason why I enchanted it with hardness is because in PvP, having a lot of health is a lot more important than having a lot of power, and I've learnt this through experience and through the experience of other top PvPers, most notably due to the Warrior. The reason being is that having high amounts of power will not deal the necessary extra amount of damage to compensate for having much lower health. The balance between power and defense doesn't balance out evenly like a lot of people tend to think. So having super high defense is a lot more important than power. And another reason why I chose this armor set is because not only does it have super high defense, which meets one of the necessary requirements, but alongside defense it also gives a lot of attack speed, which is perfect for a build like Warrior, which would make its fast attacks just even faster than it already is. The Cernic set is the only super high defense set in Arcane Odyssey that actually synergizes well with the Warrior build. Another example of an armor set that has super high defense is the Sunken set, but it also gives high attack size, which is a lot more beneficial to mages rather than warriors, as super high attack speed would easily outdo extra attack size, since you could probably hit most of the attacks with warrior at that speed regardless. Another one similar is the Argos set, which like I said again also has a lot of defense, but it gives intensity as well, which is kind of almost useless for warriors as you don't have any aura or focus you can actually activate, and I'm pretty sure it increases knockback or something too, but like I said before, it just doesn't match up against the attack speed. Another notable mention would be the Titanium set, but the secondary is Swiftness I think, which doesn't really do much aside from making you more annoying to fight against. Something I've seen some people do instead of enchanting all the Cernic's gear with hardness, they do it with Strong instead, which is also a decent alternative to give you that extra boost in power, but also gives something like 200 or 300 defense less, which in my opinion is kind of like playing with fire, considering you could be jumped in game at any time and you're not expecting it. Alright, the next thing in my build are the power booster items, because even though everything I've said above just makes high defense sound like a top priority, having a decent amount of power is quite important as well, so you don't do almost no damage at all. So to fill in that gap, I'm using a strong Arc Sphere and a strong Fair Power Amulet, and these two alone boost my power to 61, giving me a good amount of power to go with my super high defense. So what I'm left with is an almost perfectly optimized build for Warrior with no unnecessary components. I got super high defense with good power and lots of attack speed. The next part of the build is of course the weapons, and this one is kind of tricky to suss out, but what we do know is that the Vindicator is definitely the most broken weapon for Warrior currently. It used to be kind of shit pre-update, but now it's been buffed substantially and it does more damage than any other Warrior weapon as well as having really high mobility and stun effects with its attacks. FYI, I don't actually use this personally because I feel like it's just a no-skill weapon that's not fun to play with because of how just brain dead and broken it is, so I use a musket in the slot instead. The next one on here is the Scimitars of Storm, and a lot of the community actually prefer Kai's Saber, and both of them have pros and cons, but I settled on the Scimitars because its Mirrored River skill just does more damage than Sword Draw on the Saber, as well as having a longer AoE relative to the player. However, the Kai's Saber's flying slash is sort of better in a lot of people's opinions because it fires just one instead of two. So if you hit it with one, you can get a good chunk of damage, more than each individual's flying slash from the Scimitars would do itself. So honestly, it's up to you which one you go for, but in my opinion, the Scimitars is just a little bit better overall for me personally. The next weapon is the Ravenna Greatsword, and just like the Scimitars, there is an alternative, and that is the Silent Blades, as Beast Instinct gives iframe and the Claws skill does a lot of damage as well. But personally, I prefer the Ravenna Greatsword more because Tempest does a good portion of damage instantly and then does extra slowly, whereas Beast Instinct just does lots of fires with even amounts of damage each. This allows you to effectively escape it and just not get hurt too much, whereas if you're hit by Tempest even for half a second, you're really gonna feel the pain. And yeah, that is essentially a top tier warrior build right now. Of course there are varieties and variations of this, such as the Cernix set having strong and using something like the Kai Saber and Silent Blades instead of the scimitars and Ravenna Greatsword, but as long as you follow this build roughly, you're going to have a top tier warrior build. But be warned, just because you have a good build, that doesn't fix the skill issues some of you may actually have. So on that note, here's some PvP with this build, but using the musket instead of the Vindicator, because personally I like using skill based weapons instead of brain dead ones just like the Vindicator. So, here are the clips, and I hope you enjoy them. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it informative. If you did, hit that like button and subscribe for more amazing Arcane Odyssey content, and leave a comment down below letting me know what you think. And yeah, this has been Aimsell, and I'll see you later.